love books, and they love me. I get them free at the library. I read them once. I read them twice. Library books are oh so nice. I was thinking about spring coming up. It's almost that time for spring to start on our calendar. So I was thinking about all the things at the springtime. The birds, the butterflies, the flowers, and I especially thought about one certain bird that I see a lot and hear a lot in my garden. See if you can hear this sound. That's a blue jay, and it reminded me of a book that I got not too long ago called My Baby Blue Jays by John Berendt. Here's our title page, My Baby Blue Jays, Photographs and Text by John Berendt. So that means he didn't draw and color the pictures, he didn't paint them. He took pictures with his camera to make our illustrations today. And it was published in 2011. I live in a white house on a quiet street in a big city, New York. There's a small iron balcony just outside the windows of my office, which is on the 3rd floor, so that means it's very high up. One day, a blue jay landed on the railing of the balcony. It surprised me because I don't often see birds so close up. The blue jay inspected the balcony very carefully. Wonder what he's looking for. Look at him. There he is, sitting on the edge of the balcony, looking around. Then he flew back to his wife in a nearby tree, and they chirped to each other. He must have told her that he'd found a place where they could build a nest. Do you know why I think so? Because he began making a nest right away. First, he picked up a strip of white plastic that he'd found in the street and brought it up to the balcony. If you look carefully, you can see it right there in his mouth. And then he and his wife added twigs and grass until the nest was finished. You can even see the original strip of white plastic sticking out at the top. Very soon, Mama Blue Jay laid an egg in it. In fact, she laid 3 eggs. 1, 2, 3. Then she stood guard over the eggs to protect them from cats or squirrels who might come along and steal them. I kept a lookout too. See, there she is, sitting on her nest. You see? There she is, guarding those little baby eggs there with the baby blue jays. After a few weeks, 3 little blue jays were born. They settled into their new home and were very curious about anybody like me who took a close look at them. I don't think they were old enough yet to know to be afraid of people. Do you think? They had a lot of chirping and cheeping. Papa Blue Jay came back to the nest to see what all the fuss was about. He knew the little ones were hungry. So he fed them by putting food into their mouths right from his own mouth. That's just how birds do it. And what do you think he gave them to eat? Bugs and worms. Ew. Would you eat a bug or a worm? I wouldn't, but baby birds love them. After a few weeks, it was time for the baby blue jays to leave the nest and go out on their own, to run around, to hop, and best of all, maybe, to fly. At last one of the little birds hopped out of the nest. When the other two saw him standing out there on the balcony, they cheered him on. They too were eager to hop out of the nest. It kind of looks like they're saying, "Yay, go for it, you can do it." And they did. Before long, all three birds were hopping around on the balcony. They practiced flying by flapping their wings, but mostly they hopped because they weren't strong enough to fly. Not yet, anyway. Soon it was time to get off the balcony and onto the ground. This was a big step because the balcony is on the third floor of my house. Remember, that's really high up. There is quite a long drop to the ground. Oh, we don't want the babies to fall and get hurt. One of the birds looked at me as if to say, "Well, it's been swell here, but I'm afraid it's time for me to go." He looked a little nervous, I thought. Look at his face. Can you see? Look at there. He looks like he's a little bit scared. He doesn't quite know what to do. But he gathered up his courage and squeezed between two of the bars and out into the air. As he fell, he fluttered his wings frantically. Not enough to fly, just enough to slow his fall a little. He landed with a thump. Not a bad one, though, and he found himself on the doormat in front of my house. That's like a rug that you put outside your front door. Being a cautious fella, he looked first to the left and then to the right. Left, right. Then he took one last look back up at the nest, and without further ado, he stepped off the mat onto the brick courtyard and hopefully into the big, wide world. You think that little bird's going to be safe? I'm kind of worried about it. But first he would have to make his way up a few steps to get to the street. He still couldn't really fly, and his hopping wasn't going to raise him high enough to get up the steps. What should he do? He thought about it for a while. And then he did two things at once. He hopped and he fluttered his wings. Do you think he's learning how to fly by doing that? I think so. And it worked. That was one step done, almost to the gate. At last he reached the top step, and he looked out through the gate at the sidewalk. Once again, he looked first to his left and then to his right. It's kind of like we do when we cross the street. We look both ways first to make sure it's safe. And then he took his first step out onto 87th Street. Oh, be careful, little bird. Lots of traffic there. Now his biggest worry was getting stepped on by people who didn't see him. So very quickly, he hopped and fluttered across the sidewalk to the curb. It was much safer there. Okay, now that he was at the curb where the parked cars were, he thought he'd take a little walk with rest stops in between. Finally, he saw a nice spot for a pleasant rest. Did you find him right here? Did you see him there? He looked so tiny next to all those big cars. He hopped onto a wooden fence around a small garden at the base of a tree a few houses up the block from mine. He was enchanted by a pretty pink flower. He'd never seen anything like it before. And he took a breather because his first walk had been a strenuous one. That means it took a lot of energy to do that. Nobody would make the mistake of stepping on him here. He's right there where he's protected by these bars, but he can see out and get out when he wants to. I thought I saw a little smile of satisfaction on his face. Do you? He looks almost like he's smiling, doesn't he? Later that day, he came back to my moss garden to say goodbye. I told him I would miss him, but I would always remember him and his brothers or his sisters, because to tell you the truth, I couldn't tell which were boys and which were girls. But I did know that the big bird who laid the eggs had to be the mama, because the mama birds are the ones that do that. Now the blue jay is all grown up. I'm sure I've seen him around the neighborhood, but by now he looks so much like the other grown-up blue jays that I'm not sure which he is. He's probably one of the birds who fly into my backyard once in a while and take baths in my fountain, like this one. So let's see what he might sound like one more time. Maybe you can go out into your yard and find a blue jay and hear that very same sound.